So I'll just give you my background and how did a middle-aged woman like me end up in a field with, you know, talking to gamers, like you, mostly youngsters, some of you not. So it all happened when I first moved to Seattle in '93. And I started a private practice, and one of the early clients who came in, this was in 1994, was a young man of 24 who was addicted to a Dungeons & Dragons online game, which was text only, no graphics attached to it, but he was classically addicted. He was married and his marriage was falling apart. He had already lost a job at Microsoft. He was in the process of losing another job because he could not stop gaming. You know, he'd stay up late, he'd miss work. If he went into work, he'd game while he was at work, so he was very unproductive at work. And he'd come home and he'd log on and he'd game some more, and of course his wife was getting no attention and she was very displeased. So, you know, his life was out of control. He couldn't control himself, and the addiction had taken hold of him. So, and I was not trained in addiction. Beyond just the most cursory discussion of drugs and alcohol when I was in grad school. But really, I didn't know much about addiction, but I could see it, you know, in front of me. It was just so obvious that he was out of control. And he was terribly depressed because of it. So, and not surprising, right? He was losing jobs, he was losing his marriage, all of that. So that just got me intrigued. And then pretty soon I had a woman who came in who was carrying on an online affair. She was married, she had kids, but she was in a writer's forum. And so there she was online, spending every spare moment she could away from her family and carrying on this affair online. And when I asked her about it, you know, did she have any qualms about what she was doing? She thought it was perfectly fine because it wasn't physical. They weren't actually physically getting together. So it was just one experience after another like this. And my son, who's now 22, at the time was just a little boy. And I was just thinking, I can see that this is, you know, I'm seeing the start of something that's going to grow and become very large. And I don't want my son to end up in this situation that I'm seeing these clients of mine ending up in. So that's what got me interested. And back in the mid-90s, there was almost nobody doing anything about it. I don't know if any of you found Kimberly Young's work, but she was a psychologist who proposed in 1996. She presented at the American Psychological Association, and she proposed that Internet addiction disorder be added to the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. Well, that was in '96. It's now 2012, and what is happening is that the next version of the DSM is coming out, and they're going to have a new category in the overall addiction category for non-substance addictions. And that's profoundly important because it's a recognition that behaviors can be just as addictive as drugs and alcohol. And they know this now because of the brain scans and, you know, the neurochemical research that they're doing that shows that the brain is lit up by its own neurochemistry just in the same way that the brain lights up when you take drugs and alcohol that make you high and to which you can become addicted. So Internet addiction disorder is not yet going to be in that category of non-substance addiction. Gambling will be, though, so that's good. That's a start. And Internet addiction disorder is going to be mentioned at the back. There's a back section where they're talking about, where they're listing various potential disorders that one day, you know, that are under investigation and one day may make it into the, you know, realm of being fully recognized. So that's where IAD, as we call it, is currently. So over the years, back in '99, I met someone named Jake Parker, who's a chemical dependency counselor, and he and I decided to work together, and we formed a company called Internet and Computer Addiction Services. He was really interested in sex addiction, so he developed a program that I assist him in called No More Secrets, and we do a lot of work with sex addicts. And then I was always frustrated because I was working with young adults who were mostly gamers, caught up, young men between 18 and 28, caught in gaming, and I didn't have any place to send them for residential treatment, to really detox from that addiction. So I was always frustrated. And then about almost 4 years ago, I met Cosette Ray. She and her husband had the property, and we turned our property into, their property, into Restart. And so it's mostly young males who end up coming there. They're mostly between 18 and 28. We've had some females, not a lot, and we've had some people older than 28, a couple in their 30s, a few in their 40s, but mostly it's this 18 to 28-year-old group that comes, and they're mostly gamers. We had one guy who was addicted to fan fiction. That was his primary addiction.
How can you be addicted to that?
He was. We've had folks addicted, like a whole series of things, social networking and gaming and pornography, kind of a whole constellation of things. But gaming is definitely the standout addiction. And of course, what would you guess what genre would you guess they're mostly addicted to?
I'm going to say puzzle games.
Nope.
Role-playing?
Yeah, the MMOs, right? That's World of Warcraft, of course, is top of the list. And I'll explain to you why these games tend to be the most addictive of all the games. In order to become addicted, you've got to be able to stimulate your brain to release dopamine, opiates, and other neurochemicals in excess and over a prolonged period. All right? And when you can do that to your brain, whether it's through a game or through pornography or through drugs and alcohol or whatever it is, when you can do that with your brain, that's what you have the potential to become addicted to. Okay? So, what is it about those games that make them so addictive? Well, for one thing, they don't end, right? That they're designed so that there's always a new universe, there's always an expansion pack, there's always something coming out so that you can keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. No matter how good you get at it, there's always something new to go do and explore in the game. And that is something which adds to the addictive element because it prolongs it, right? You can play that game nonstop for, over 50 hours, right? And you don't have to ever reach the end of it. And the people who have died, and I'm sure you all know that there are people who have died gaming, mostly the reports come from China and South Korea. Those are people who've been gaming nonstop for usually 50 plus hours, and because they're not moving, they're developing blood clots in their legs, which then go to their hearts and stop their hearts. So one of the things that happens is that this is a game. This is a genre of games that can just be played on and on and on and on and on, and that's part of what leads to the addiction. But what are the pleasures of the game? All games, no matter what type of game it is, operates on a principle called intermittent reinforcement, which means the unpredictability of reward. Okay? If you take an action in the game, you don't know, is my action going to work or not work? Am I going to get shot or am I going to succeed? What's going to happen? Well, it's that unpredictability of reward that we are all drawn to. If you think about how you use your phones, right? Who here texts? Is there anyone who doesn't text?
Me. I don't text.
You are a rare bird. So are you. So if you just think about texting, when you send a text to somebody, you are now anticipating a response, right? And it is that anticipation of a response which actually gives you a little shot of dopamine. And then when you hear your phone, or you see that somebody has responded to you, oh, that's another shot of these neurochemicals. And we actually get mildly addicted, just mildly addicted, to that unpredictable reward of that happens in texting. Okay, so intermittent reinforcement happens with all gaming. You add to that the elements that all of you are studying right here, right? You're studying game design. You're learning how to make games really interesting, how to make an interesting story, how to make graphics that are engaging, music that is pleasurable and engaging, powerfully interesting or stimulating. And then there's the social element, right? Puzzle games don't cut it because puzzle games, for the most part, you can play by yourself. But when you add the social element, you go into the game, you get to know people in the game, you become part of a guild, you're part of a team, you're competing. Competing can be a lot of fun. Cooperation can be a lot of fun, right? The feeling like you're part of this social group, you have a place where you belong, that's very rewarding. So you're starting to add layer upon layer of rewards that end up making these games very alluring and rewarding and potentially, therefore, addictive. Any questions so far about anything I've said?
Well, sort of have a question, but it's...
On a different subject?
More so expanding the symptoms and behavior.
Of addiction?
Well, addiction maybe, but the type of reaction or response from others who wish they could or somehow don't appreciate. I'm not giving you a clear idea of what I'm thinking, but let me hear you more. I'll try
Okay,
to
and formulate your question. Right. You have a question?
Yes, so what other sorts of common behavior that doesn't involve computers can also be addictive, just that we kind of wouldn't think about besides drugs, of course?
Porn, looking at porn can be, and engaging in sexual activities can be highly addictive, or flirtation has the potential. There's a concept that you might be unfamiliar with, which is sex and love addiction. And love addiction, there are people who become very addicted to the pursuit of getting attention from other people, and their lives can spin very much out of control because they become compulsive in the pursuit of their flirtations. That would be an example. Gambling is another behavioral, potentially addictive behavior. So sex, romance, gambling, those are common ones that if you begin to look around, you'll see those things fairly commonly. So just about anything that you can do in excess that gives you a high and that you can do in a prolonged way has the potential to be addictive. So those are some common ones.
What is life like at the place away from gaming that you were talking about, the rehab center?
Our Restart program?
Yes.
So when people come out to Restart, they are there for a minimum of 45 days. They're usually there for 45 to 90 days in phase 1 of the program. And they have no access to digital technology while they're there. It's a rural environment and very beautiful setting, and it's like a kind of family style living because we only have 6 beds. So, you're kind of living there with people in close quarters, but we really have a strong emphasis on physical fitness. So we do CrossFit training with everyone, backpacking every other week, yoga instruction. So a lot about getting physically fit. And it's interesting because most of the guys who come are physically quite unfit. They've been spending years in a sedentary way, right, in front of their computer screens. So they tend to be underweight or overweight and poorly muscled. And they love this CrossFit training because they start to sort of come into what is their birthright. As young males, it's really their birthright to feel fit and to build muscle and and to enjoy their bodies. And so they start doing that out at Restart. We have you know, they sleep and wake on a regular schedule because everybody arrives sleep deprived and completely, you know, their sleep cycles are completely odd and strange and irregular. And so we get them on a regular sleep cycle, and we make sure that they are eating healthy food. So there's a strong emphasis on just physical health, right? And then we do a lot of psychotherapy to help them understand what has driven the addiction, because when people become addicts, there's usually something that underlies that. You know, it's like maybe they've been bored for much of their lives. Maybe they were bullied. Maybe they were terribly lonely. Maybe there was conflict in the family from which they wanted to escape. You know, there are things that have gone on, usually that drive the addiction. So we help them understand what those things are and get them started in understanding and addressing those issues. So that gives you an idea. That's
Are they allowed
there's
to
more
play?
stuff to it, but that's
Are they allowed to play board games or like
Yes.
role plays?
Absolutely. We
Yeah.
want them to develop, either rediscover old interests or develop new interests. And so we have a piano there and several guitars and drums, and if they already have an instrument that they play, they're encouraged to come bring their instruments. So we really encourage them to engage with music. We have lots of interesting board games that they can play. We have a library full of good, interesting books, both novels, good novels, and you know, self-help or psychotherapy, psychological literature, and we just promote their interests, whatever, to the degree that we can. Yeah. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, was there any a case where the addiction wasn't a video game related thing, but other games, like a board game or like, well, not a game related thing, but like, was there a D&D related, just as a whole paper?
Yeah, I know D&D is something which often, it seems to have the potential to be addictive, and I've met a number of guys who kind of got into video games through D&D, and it seems like it's part of the culture, just like anime seems to be part of that culture. D&D seems to be as well. But I think that D&D, if you think in terms of harm reduction, if you're an addicted gamer and you give up the gaming but you go to D&D, probably, not necessarily, depends on how you do it, but that might be a way to reduce harm, because with D&D you're a little less likely to get caught in the cycle of doing it for days on end, but you still can overdo it.
Right. So would you say there is a difference between the digital life of video games versus like, I think that sounds bigger to say, but like non-video games that are still games, like D&D or just like board games? Do you think there's like a significant difference?
Well,
That's
I mean, a lot of board games do have an end. You know, it's like you play the game and you come to an end and you've had fun, and then you get on with the rest of your life.
right.
There are board games that are really fun that don't really seem to end, and people can get very obsessive in their playing of those board games, and that is potentially an addiction that can be a problem. It's just a little less likely to happen with those kinds of board games. Like magic cards is another thing that I know a lot of gamers really love, magic cards. And is there some addictive potential there? I think there is, but not quite as intense and high a likelihood, I think, as with video games. Yeah.
Since they're in the program kept apart from digital electronics for such a long period of time, is there ever a kind of culture shock when they reintroduce it?
Yes. It's a great question. So what happens is that we have an aftercare program, because of course they're going to have to encounter and deal with digital technology. They're going to use them, computers. There's just no way around it. They're going to use computers. They're going to have cell phones. And so how are they going to reintegrate this digital technology into their lives, and how are they going to stay sort of safe? So we make them think that through in great detail before they leave. And then if they can come into our aftercare program, they live in an apartment with other participants from the program, and there's no digital technology in that apartment. It's like in the world of drugs and alcohol, it would be called a safe house. And so they get to, in our aftercare program, they get to live in a safe house, and then they're busy in school, or they're working, or both, and still spending time at Restart when they have the time. And in that way, their lives are busy, but when they need to use a computer in that aftercare phase, they can either come to Restart, or they can use it at the computer lab at the college, or they go to the library. And so it's just, you know, they're kind of getting reacquainted with it, but learning, you know, having an opportunity to practice using it, hopefully in a healthy way. They stumble many times. They do stumble and, you know, fall back into old patterns, but because they're with us in aftercare, we can talk with them about it. They can learn from that experience and then hopefully get back on track. Yeah.
You ever come across people addicted to watching YouTube?
Yes.
Yeah.
Really. And Reddit is another one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and there's some other of these sites that people love to sort of troll around, and that can, you know, again, think in terms of intermittent reinforcement. You know, one thing leads to another and another and another and another, and yeah, it totally fits that pattern of intermittent reinforcement. Yeah.
Where do you find the line drawn between a habit and an addiction?
Really, all addictions have certain characteristics in common. One is that it gives you a high. That alone does not make it an addiction. Two is that you overindulge to the degree that your brain goes through some changes that we call tolerance. And what that means is that the brain withdraws the receptors. It's been overstimulated. It withdraws receptors to pick up those neurochemicals in an effort to return your brain to normal, and that's called tolerance. So if we all are familiar with the idea of tolerance to a drug, right? So you're getting high on cocaine, but after a while you're just not getting the high anymore that you want, right? Because your brain has withdrawn the receptors to pick up the dopamine released by the drug. And so then you need more cocaine in order to get the boost, the high again. And that is called tolerance. And then if you stop the drug use or the video game use or whatever, now your brain is in a deficit mode. It doesn't have the normal level of receptors to pick up these neurochemicals. And then you're thrown into withdrawal, okay? So all addictions have these things in common: the development of tolerance, the experience of withdrawal, and engaging with the behavior in spite of its negative consequences. So that's what you have to think about when you're trying to decide, am I just in a habit that's okay and I'm really not, and there's not a negative consequence to what I'm doing, and I don't find that I need more time, more. You know, I can kind of hold steady at this level, and I just enjoy it, but I can leave it and do my schoolwork, do my family life, see my friends, get exercise, get sleep, you know, and it becomes just a nice, fun part of my life.
So control?
Huh?
Having control?
Exactly. If you have control over it, and it's not controlling you, yeah, you're good to go. It's when it controls you and your life slowly but steadily spins out of control, that's when you're looking at an addiction. Yeah.
Why do you think there are so few female game addicts compared to males? Because there's definitely no shortage of women who use the internet and play video games. Although often in MMOs in particular, women will often misrepresent themselves as male.
Right. You know, I don't know that any good research has been done to really tease out the answer to that question. You know, it's a really fascinating question to me. Is, you know, what's going on with women that they don't seem to get as addicted? Certainly there are women who do get addicted, and I know I've heard many stories of women who get addicted to a lot of the casual games that you can play, on an iPhone, puzzle games, Farmville, those sort of more casual games. Women are often drawn to those, maybe because they're easy to play in the midst of a busy life. And women can certainly get addicted to the social networking sites. So why they don't seem to be as profoundly addicted as the men, though, I don't have the answer to it. Maybe because they really tend to be more social. It's like social things matter to them a lot. And maybe that maintaining real-world social connections helps keep everything a little more moderated. I'm just guessing. I'm not sure.
Maybe in the way that women are brought up in this culture, it might affect that sort of behavior.
Right. So it's a really interesting question, and I'd love to see what the research reveals, which eventually I'm sure it'll start throwing more and more light on that. I think there were maybe some other questions. Yeah.
Got a question about, do you ever treat anybody that have sort of just a general internet addiction, like they're addicted to Facebook and some games and just the whole...
Yeah. Some people are have just a general internet addiction. Yeah, most definitely. Yeah.
I remember when I think I saw you on television when you were having your first clients.
Uh-huh.
There was a show.
Okay.
You probably changed your plans and treatment very much since then. What is the first effort to break or reduce the symptoms or behavior problems? Do you take away something? You obviously remove everyone into a new environment, but what satisfies that desire to give you control and try to change?
I'm not quite sure what you're asking. I mean, when somebody comes in to restart, they've chosen to come, right? They're not forced there. They've chosen to come because they, maybe they've been strong-armed there by their parents who have said, look, we're not going to have you in our home anymore. Either go for treatment or go make it on your own. But when they come, they go through that withdrawal period for about 3 weeks where their brain's putting back receptors to pick up normal levels of dopamine and they start to feel better, right? They just start to feel better. So that's kind of what people experience when they come. But does that get it all at your question?
I like the choice to be objective, observe.
Yeah.
If I had a good question about what I see developing, or maybe it's just more of the same with a new method or something, I really don't have the question formed. There's so many choices, and limitations that someone wants to control and become master of. In a video game, maybe it's, not the typical lifestyle, which is a new escape in some ways, or maybe it's just an opportunity that has to become a real story. I'm wondering, like in AA, the first thing they do is to admit that they have a problem. They change their behavior. They follow the list. They can go home in the afternoon. You obviously have some processes or rules that help guide that treatment. And I'm wondering, what is the first few things that is important that your clients accept?
Okay, all right. So we do run a 12-step meeting. By the way, it's open to anybody. So if any of you need a 12-step meeting to help you with an addiction to digital technology, you're welcome to come, and call it ITAA, Internet and Technology Addicts Anonymous. And so that is just one piece of the many pieces that we offer our clients. But helping them set bottom lines, middle lines, top lines, bottom lines are the things that they commit to not do. Let's say they come in and they're addicted to MMOs and pornography, and they maybe set those as bottom lines. Those are things that they are making a commitment. They're just not going to do those things anymore going forward. Right. So we have them think through all of that in those 12-step meetings. But I think just the focus on good mental health and good physical health while they're away from that addictive medium, which is the technology, just really allows them to start seeing themselves they start to get a really good handle on just how out of control their behavior was, where it led them, and what they want going forward.
One of the things I remember the most about your office is everywhere you look, there is something on the wall, the shelf. There is something at every eye level. Is it still like that?
Yeah, it's still like that.
Maybe I could visit one of these
Sure.
12 steps.
Sure. We'll talk afterwards. That'd be great. Bruce, and then I'll get to your questions too.
Yeah, could you maybe provide one example of a scenario where somebody's addicted, moved from, getting back to Kelly's question, moved from a habit to an addiction, and the consequences of, what the worst case scenarios are. One worst case scenario where it maybe ended up a restart of your office, just to give an idea of why this is a problem,
Okay.
Why addictions are